time. You don't, and it's sad. But I want to go to the end of the class with the idea that maybe we need to cultivate our own environmental ecological interiors, and maybe that's what environmental virtue ethicists are trying to say to us. That outcome-driven thinking ignores, right? Ignores, and let's not ignore our interior worlds, and let's not ignore the reality that we can conduct our lives in virtuous or less virtuous ways. And virtue, personal excellence, is not culturally relative. We know what the rough outlines of an excellent life would be. The best revenge is a life well lived. I've heard that before, and that's certainly. So we have to know what a life well lived is, right? And we might throw up our hands and say, we don't know what a life well lived is. It's entirely subjective, culturally relativistic, and why even bother trying to figure out what that might be? But environmental virtue ethicists insist that we have access to an objective understanding of a life well lived. And a life well lived requires, according to the environmental the environmental virtue ethicist, going back to Henry David Thoreau or earlier, the environmental virtue ethicist insists that a life well lived includes a life characterized by certain deep and meaningful relationships with the natural world. Okay? So the environmental virtue ethicist kind of adds to traditional virtue ethics by arguing that, yeah, traditional virtue ethics is on the right track, but we also need to include considerations about our characters regarding non-human natural entities. All right? So anyway, Wallace Stegner, I think, is easily identified as being an author who's working within an environmental virtue ethics tradition. He's writing about 1960, before the emergence of an ecology movement. All right? Wallace Stegner is writing at the tail end of the conservation movement, when the conservation movement begins to morph into the environmental movement, right? Which begins to happen about 3 or 4 years later, in the mid-1960s, mainly as a result of the publication of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. Okay? But Wallace Stegner is writing before, 2 or 3 years before the publication of Silent Spring, 2 or 3 years before Uncle Aldo's book became popular, right? And what he's trying to defend in his wilderness letter is that wilderness is essential to preserving the character of the American people. Okay, that's what he's saying. Preservation of wilderness is essential to preservation of the character of the people of the United States. Okay, nowadays it seems like a bit of an odd sort of claim, but so he goes through, right, and these are all very familiar, and these are all anthropocentric arguments. In fact, Stegner, you could easily read Stegner as staying totally on the anthropocentric reservation. He's just talking about treating wilderness and nature in such a way as to improve our quality of life and preserve a national character that he thinks we ought to preserve. Okay? But really all the way through his environmental virtue ethics argument, you could read his work as being pretty firmly anthropocentric, right? But certainly these first few kinds of values he describes are all, even obviously the library of unread books argument is an anthropocentric argument. These are all anthropocentric arguments, right? You don't see squirrels with library cards, right? They're all, right? Nobody cares about libraries except humans. So the library of unread books argument is always an anthropocentric argument, right? It's an exotic anthropocentric argument, but it's anthropocentric all the way, right? I saw all kinds of aesthetic arguments, scientific value arguments, right? They go beyond economic use. They go beyond mainstream use arguments, but they're still use arguments, right? The library of unread books is a good argument because it refers to a fundamental use that we tend to make of wilderness and wildlife and species, right? Anyway, so these are all arguments that others have drawn attention to, and Stegner is interested in arguments that are perhaps a little more abstract. He's interested in wilderness as an idea. Okay? He says wilderness is a spiritual resource. Wilderness should be preserved because it is needed to sustain an essential part of the unique spirit and character of the American people. All right? As wilderness is destroyed, so too is American society, or the idea of American culture destroyed. All right? So somehow wilderness forms the character of U.S. society. All right? Something a little bit objectionable about all these kinds of arguments. There's something imperialistic. I'm not quite sure. But every time I read Stegner, I can't help but admire his gift of language, but I also worry, perhaps, a little bit about his tendency to embrace an imperial mindset that says, this is USA. Compare, for example, what would Birch say in response to Stegner? He might say, dude, you're just all about imperialism here. Anyway, it's interesting. And it's reference to the Indian names on the land, right? But it's true. Perhaps another fruitful inquiry. I don't want to, turn you guys off the wall of Stegner, and I would encourage all of you. If you need some summer reading, any novel, any piece of writing by Wallace Stegner, you will be thrilled to have picked it up. But one of his most famous quotes from the Wilderness Letter, he says, "We are a wild species." And there's Darwin again, right? The attentive student will have observed and will have ticked off just dozens and dozens of references to Darwin all term long. Darwin has been haunting us, rightfully so, right? Because Darwin is that cultural moment where humankind becomes continuous with the natural world, right? And where all the non-human animals become our relatives culturally, right? We begin to recognize that. That's an enlightenment, a key insight of enlightenment thinking, that we are animals. Humans are animals. So there's Darwin again. And then Stegner observes, nobody ever tamed or domesticated or scientifically bred us. But for at least 3 millennia, we have been engaged in a cumulative and ambitious race to modify and gain control of our environment, and in the process, we have come close to domesticating ourselves. All right? So, and perhaps we have more chance, we might say this especially of we residents of the Pacific Northwest. Perhaps, it's been said of us, that we have a chance, more than many peoples, to protect, right? Remember, the salmon are still spawning on the western slope of the Colorado Rockies in Idaho, and the orcas are still living and catching them, right? And everything in between is hanging on by a thread, but it's still there. We have a chance, more than most peoples, right? If the abstract dream of human liberty and human dignity became in America something more than an abstract dream, mark it down at least partially to the fact that we were in subdued ways subdued by what we conquered. All right? An American, insofar as he is new and different at all, is a civilized man who has renewed himself or herself in the wild. All right, and then we need the spiritual refreshment that nature can provide us. We need wild country available to us, even if we never do anything more than drive to its edge and look in. For it can be a means of reassuring ourselves of our sanity as creatures, a part of the geography of hope. And you'll encounter that term in the future, I'm sure, geography of hope. But and that's where that comes from Wallace Stegner's Wilderness Letter. All right. And there's our first environmental virtue ethicist, and our first hippie, right, et cetera, et cetera. So, we have obviously a lot more stuff we could get through, but I want to leave you guys plenty of time to it's this virtue ethics is, well, there's really a lot. I'm sorry, I apologize that we haven't spent enough time on virtue ethics as perhaps we ought to. So, anyway. So Thoreau's environmental virtues, adding to the list of virtues that the Greeks bequeathed. The Greeks identified, Aristotle and Aristotle's followers have identified a whole bunch of different virtues. The idea is that aspiring toward these particular character traits is the central insight of the virtue ethicist, of all virtue ethicists. And it may be flawed, it may be wrong, it may be a misguided insight. But the basic idea for the virtue ethicist is that if you wish to live an excellent life, if you want to achieve personal excellence, which is what the Greek word virtu or arete, virtu isn't a Greek word. Arete is virtue in Greek, okay? And arete really means personal excellence. But if you want to achieve personal excellence, then you have to cultivate certain virtues in yourself, certain physical virtues, certain intellectual virtues, and certain moral virtues. And moreover, in a perhaps what might seem a shocking inference in today's world, if you do cultivate these virtues, if you cultivate personal excellence in yourself, then you are much more likely to be happy. And moreover, happiness, not in a flat sense, but in a sustained, long-term sense, is the ultimate goal of all human life, right? They kind of agree with the utilitarians with that basic insight, although the utilitarians have used too flat of a notion of happiness, according to the virtue ethicists. The virtue ethicists is true happiness, long-term enjoyment, demands certain things of the person, right? And the utilitarians don't recognize that sufficiently. So for the virtue ethicists, the goal is not happiness really. Something like happiness, they're okay with that, but they would be more specific. The virtue ethicist says the ultimate goal of human life is eudaimonia, all right? And that's a Greek word that means sustained enjoyment, okay? Sustained enjoyment. And to achieve sustained enjoyment in your life, you have to cultivate practical wisdom, and you have to cultivate all of these virtues. Okay? And then Thoreau comes along and says, well, we also have a relationship that goes beyond just human beings. We have relationships with other animals and with ecological wholes. And once we consider all these other kinds of relationships that we have, then we have to add these character traits to the list also, right? Of character traits. The idea is that cultivating all these kinds of character traits is more consistent with universal beauty, right? And that not only do individual humans and all individual beings strive for the kind of balance that's reflected in these character traits, but even the natural world, even ecosystems, strive for this kind of balance. And so integrity, stability, and beauty are features not only of individuals, right? But as Leopold, that's why he uses them. They're features of ecosystems too. And so we can speak, like Cafaro points out, we can speak of the virtue of an ecosystem, right? And we can measure the virtue of an ecosystem with reference to its integrity, stability, and beauty. So those are super virtues. Integrity, stability, and beauty are super virtues, right? In the sense that they apply not only to individuals, but they apply to communities. And not only to human communities, but to biotic communities, which is where Leopold is most interested in applying them, right? But also to mixed human biotic communities. I think of that thinker we never spend enough time on Warwick Fox, his idea of cohesion. What is his idea? Warwick Fox's cohesive. You guys, I just blab on, and I sometimes worry about how much people are paying attention. But anyway, what was Warwick Fox's? A responsive cohesion, right? You could think of responsive cohesion, right? You could put responsive cohesion up here with these other characteristics, right? And Warwick Fox's point is that responsive cohesion is a character trait of excellent, flourishing individuals, right? Human, literally just physical health, physical health is characterized by optimal responsive cohesion, according to Warwick Fox. And then he says, responsive cohesion is also the measure of health at the biotic community level, right? And even more, it's the measure of the appropriate mixed community, right? Our built environment can be organized around responsive cohesion, right? Now, do these desks biodegrade? These desks don't biodegrade. They're not responsively cohesive, right? Warwick Fox would say, get these damn desks out of here, and all these aspects of the built environment which are not responsively cohesive, get rid of them all, right? Because he's saying we have a, right, that's not only the measure of of the health of a biotic community, it's also the measure of the health of the human community, and it's also the measure of the health of the mixed human, non-human community, right? So, in any event, we're trying to return back to anthropos. What kind of anthropos do we want, right? And that's the question of the virtue ethicist, isn't it? The virtue ethicist is not really interested in action norms, the way the utilitarian is, the way the Kantian is, right? Modern moral philosophy is distinguished by an exclusive focus on action norms. Whereas if you go back a couple thousand years and you look at the way that the Athenians were doing moral philosophy a few hundred years before the Common Era, you find that they're not so much interested in action norms. They're interested in character norms. Okay? But they're saying that the character, right? Aristotle in particular believes that we can articulate a mathematics of virtue. And that character, good character, takes a mathematic, right? There are contours of good character that can be objectively identified. All right? And if that wasn't the case, then it wouldn't make any sense to speak of the beauty of a character. All right? Let me see if I can get to that page of notes. Notice the similarity between Carson and Leopold. Right? Carson says, I think we are challenged to prove our maturity and our mastery, not of nature but of ourselves. Leopold says, it's time for humans to become plain citizens. Right? Plain members of the biotic community instead of conquerors. Right? Making the same kind of point. Alright, so there's some material on there, but I want to get to the... Okay, so Aristotle... I'm really running out of time here. I thought there was a page of notes here about... about beauty. That is it. Okay. The golden mean is a measurement of beauty as well as a measurement of virtue and character and conduct. Three elements of beauty, and this is why Aristotle and the virtue ethicists think that we can speak about a beautiful character in roughly the same sense that we can speak about a beautiful body. All right? And the Greeks, by the way, would never speak about a body as being beautiful for its physical appearance alone. Beauty has necessarily a characterological dimension, so the idea that a man or a woman could be beautiful without having a beautiful character, for the Greeks would be unthinkable. All right? So check off all the list of beautiful people in the United States. The Greeks would just throw them in a dustbin and say, to hell with these people. They're ugly. They're hideous. Right? Obviously, because we've lost our virtue traditions, right? But there are three elements of beauty, right? And these apply to an inner character as well as to a physical form. Symmetry, proportion, and harmony. All right? And these same elements can be used to measure the beauty of a body or the beauty of a person's character. All right? And then each characterological virtue stands for Aristotle at the point of a golden mean. And what he means by that is it's exactly at the midpoint between excess and deficiency. Okay? So take, for example, courage. Okay? Courage is a golden mean. It's at the perfect golden mean between recklessness and cowardice. All right? An excess of courage is recklessness. A deficit of courage is cowardice. All right? regarding honesty, another virtue, an excess of honesty regarding self is boasting, a deficiency is self-deprecation. And so Aristotle thinks that we have actual concrete guidelines about how to cultivate our characters. Anyway, but I know I'm running out of time and we want to leave plenty of... So enough of that. We're going to call an end to our term here. I'm going to call an end to it. We have another 15 or 20 minutes to break up into groups. And I email, I should have printed out more copies of this. But if you are planning to do a written take-home final exam, then I should know your name, by the way, and you can leave. Okay? I should know your name and have you on my list of students who are doing the written take-home final exam option. And now you can leave. Okay? But no, you can't leave. I'm sorry. You can't leave. Nobody can leave until everybody has turned. Well, if you are doing the take-home written final exam, then you can leave as soon as you've done a course evaluation. Okay?
Oh, sorry.
So, Sonia, will you go upstairs and deliver these for us? 393 Newburger. Just upstairs on the third. 393.
Yeah.
393. Is anybody else happen to be going upstairs?
You're
Okay,
going
what's
to
your name?
Okay.
Jesse.
Jesse.
So Jesse will. So make sure Jesse collects your course evaluation. Okay. And we'll make sure we get those done today. And I will write our CRN information number on the board for everybody. And then when you're done doing your course evaluation, then break up into your groups. Okay? I sent out a bunch of new information in emails to everybody. Okay? So everybody should have an email of how this is going to proceed. But we will do our group project next Thursday, all right, a week from today at 10 a.m., okay? And it's the Environmentalist Coalition against the Pro-Dam Coalition, all right? That's how it works out. So everybody here, unless you are planning on doing a written take-home exam, then you should have been identified already as a member of one of those two teams. Yes?
Is that going to be held in this room?
Yes, it's our final exam period. Yeah. It's just our normal final exam period. We're going to do it right here. We don't have any choice. They don't give us any other room.
And it's when? Tuesday or Thursday?
Thursday at 10 a.m. From 10 a.m. to 12:15. If you're doing the written final exam, then you are more than welcome to show up, turn in your final exam, and take a seat in the back of the room and observe. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know it. People are going to be at each other's throats. People are going to be a little bit laughing a little bit, you know, not taking it too seriously, but it is pretty damn serious, I think. You know, it's the future of our watershed resources. So yeah, we'll do it right here, right? I mean, that's what we do. Yeah, we'll use the final exam period. We'll show up here at 10 o'clock. Figure to go right until 12:15. Okay? Take about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions? No? All right. So what's happened, all right, is what I've learned is that this has to be a hearing in front of the House, right? The House, we have a bicameral legislature in the United States of America under our constitutionally limited Republican form of or Democratic form of anyway, whatever the hell we've got. We would have a hearing in front of the Water, Power, and Oceans Subcommittee of the United States House Committee on Natural Resources. Okay? And lo and behold, one of the two representatives whose districts are physically there, these are both districts, they're at the two districts, it's districts 4 and 5 in southeastern Washington. And I've invited both of them, not literally, okay, God, hell with them. But Dan Newhouse, so if somebody on the pro-dam team wants to be Dan Newhouse, that's fine too. I'm going to leave you guys organize the pro-dam, the dam defenders, you guys have more, you guys just organize your dam defense however you see fit, and you're welcome to have somebody be Representative Dan Newhouse and have somebody, these are both Republicans from Southeast Washington who serve in the U.S. House. right? And the other one is, what's her name? Kathy McMorris Rogers. Kathy McMorris Rogers, another Republican, and actually she doesn't serve on this subcommittee. Dan Newman does, or Dan Newhouse does, right? But she doesn't serve, but I've invited her, right? Fictionally, I've invited her. So, and the reason I've invited her is because she's another Republican, and her district encompasses virtually the whole Lower Snake River. So she's the one who's going to have a lot to say about these 4 Lower Snake dams. She's a Republican. She's almost certainly, she and Dan Newhouse are almost certainly on the side of the pro-dam coalition. So if the pro-dam coalition wants to assign 2 people, right, Corey, if you want to assign somebody to play the role of those 2 representatives and actually get in front of us and talk, go for it, okay? I think that's easy to say. They would both be opposed to what the environmentalists want to do, okay? So what's going to happen basically is that the environmentalists have asked for this hearing, okay? And they get to go first, okay? And I have the schedule all laid out that I emailed to everybody, all right? We're going to have 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, okay? 15 minutes, the Environmentalist Coalition goes first. The Environmentalist Coalition executive summary goes first. Explain your plan and why we should adopt your plan. 15 minutes. Second 15 minutes, the pro-dam coalition responds. It gives us your plan. Keep all the dams in place. Maybe build more dams. Who knows? Maybe build more dams, but keep them all in place, and why. Okay? And then after that, we've got the anthro-environmentalists, right? And you guys probably have the most work to do. All that consequentialist analysis about dam removal, all the economics, all the fisheries science facts, all that stuff, from an environmentalist point of view, stands right is under that. That's your team. That's your anthropocentric environmentalists, right? All those great consequentialist reasons for stripping out the dams for human reasons, right? That's your territory. You got to cover all that, okay? And then the pro-dam coalition responds, right? Right? And the pro-dam coalition gets to respond from an anthropocentric perspective, and that's the heart of your argument, isn't it? Right? Yeah. The pro-dam coalition is saying these dams are best for for humans, period. Right? And then next, okay, and then next comes the more than anthropocentric environmentalists, and then the response. And that's how it's going to go. Okay, and then we'll leave some time for concluding remarks from each side, and then we'll leave some time for questions and answers from myself and from other panelists. Okay? That's how I envision it going. You've all got that information in our emails. So when you have finished completing a course evaluation, then about half of you are going to get together with Corey. Okay, Corey, raise your hand. Corey is he's the overall leader of the Dam Removal Coalition, right? Of the Environmentalist Coalition.
Wait.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Corey.
I'm pro-dam.
Crazy. He's the overall leader of the pro-dam coalition, okay? And then Andrew Ball is the overall leader, and you have 2 lieutenants underneath you who are going to, so you have a little bit less work than Corey in terms of organization, but underneath Andrew you have a coordinator for the anthropocentric environmental community, and that is who?
I think it's me. Kyle.
Kyle?
Yeah.
Kyle McMillan?
Moore.
Kyle Moore, sorry. Kyle McMillan's different. All right, Kyle Moore, yeah, there you are. Anthrop, okay. And then you also have, and your work is cut out for you, Kyle. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Kyle McMillan was my last one. Anyway, but yeah, because you are going to cover all the familiar, right? And your arguments are the ones that are most recognizable to most people, right?
Yeah.
The familiar old anthropocentric consequentialist reasons for taking out these dams. And then you have a whole bunch of, right, of expert witnesses that you can deploy to prosecute your argument, right? You've got expert witnesses from the fisherman community, you've got expert witnesses from the river rafter community, right, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then your more than anthropocentric environmental community coordinator is Ben Howard. Ben, right? There's Ben back there. Anyway, all of you, and then, so all of you, you'll either, after you fill out your evaluation, you'll either meet with Andrea, right, and Ben and Kyle, or you'll meet with Corey, all right? And then Corey, I just leave, you guys organize. The other side has a little more definition of its roles.
Right.
You guys just put together the best you can. Just throw in some wise use, right? You got one wise use consultant, and then you've got one group A conservationist consultant. Philosophically, that's where most of your arguments are going to come from.
Yeah.
But then you're also going to have all these practical role players, like Walter, the utility, you know, the utility consumer guy.
Oh yeah, I wrote them down for sure. And like for the mother or the person that doesn't want to pay more for their or can't pay more for their electricity bill. And
all that stuff, exactly. Those guys. So you've got your philosophical. You've got to appoint a couple guys to head up the wise use consultant team and the group A the economist guys.
Right.
Right. And then you can appoint different people to play your roles of your mom and pop, you know, the restaurant owners whose utility rates are going to go way up now. All right. All right. So let me just hand these out and let me get out of here, okay? And take your time, and so set up, you know, more meetings down the road, and have fun with it. So then when you're done with your evaluations, there should be plenty to make their way back there.
you guys need me back there?
Oh, you're doing the take home? Just send me an email, so I'll put your name on the list. All right, so,
Wait, what are you doing?
No, I think that was the wrong one.
that was last class. Environmental ethics, we are CRN 63092. Did everyone see that? 63092. Okay? And then my last name is Mulier, Professor Mulier. All right, and I will have office hours this afternoon if you want. Here is the, what was your name again?
Jesse.
So give your completed course evaluation to Jesse. When you're done with it, take all the time you want, and then wait around for Andrew and Corey to organize your groups, and then you can schedule any meetings between now and next Thursday you want.
6309.
The CRN is 63092. 63092, Philosophy 310. Professor Mulier, Mulier.